Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, today we are going to be talking about the new meta in the Gladiator circuit. That is right, week 3 and 4 metas are about to start for the GC, and they will be, well, somewhat different. Still, the theme is going to be similar, where Mystic champions do get an advantage and nodes do play into it as well, basically providing buffs. So let's break it down first. We still have the Eldritch Star of Attack node, where Mystic Attacker nullifies a buff on the defender. They inflict a neutralized passive with 30% potency for 20 seconds, maximum 3 of them. And whenever a buff on the defender is prevented by these neutralizes, the attacker passively gains 3% of their power. Kind of like offsetting some levels of MD, I suppose. Then defensive buffs will start with Footloose. After activating a special attack, the defender gains an evade buff, granting 25% chance to evade incoming attacks, and an unstoppable buff for 7 seconds. So let's face it, this node is kind of annoying, but at the same time, you can use anybody against it. And therefore, with the continuation of that in the rest of the nodes, this is going to be a very open meta. There's like virtually no champion that you cannot use, or very few champions that you cannot use. And whenever we do get a particularly open meta, they are typically fast-paced metas as well, especially if there are other champions that get empowered further. Obviously, there will be some abilities that are more significant than others. For instance, champions with slow will have an advantage because they will completely offset Footloose. For instance, Mystic champions with very potent neutralize and nullify abilities or buff duration reduction will obviously still get a significant advantage because they will either be feeding their Mystic Dispersion, gaining power, doing more, special attacks, and most significantly, they will not be delayed by Footloose. Therefore, I think this is going to be a fairly dual type of meta. And the best way to explain it here would be where if you have a good counter to Footloose, you'll be fast. If you're going up against a champion without a good counter to Footloose, you can still use a variety of champions, you're just going to be significantly slow. Now, the one thing that is going to shake things up here is going to be the underhanded comment in combination with feats of power, especially in also Footloose, because all of these are active buffs. And underhanded comment, for each buff on the defender, the attacker has their defensive ability accuracy reduced by 15%. And what this will inevitably lead is going to be a lot of extra block damage and a lot of failed parries. That's the main thing here. Because if you take a look at feats of power, it states when above 1 bar of power, gain a fury buff. When above 2 bars of power, gain a precision buff. When at 3 bars of power, gain a cruelty buff. So these are like 3 buffs, and this basically means that at every given moment, opponent's pretty much going to have a buff active, which means you're going to have some defensive ability accuracy reduced, which means, your parries might fail. And then in combination with Footloose, that makes it so that the buff is going to be active pretty much the entire time. Because feats of power, when opponent uses the special attack, they will naturally go below 1 bar of power and they will get no buffs from feats of power. However, Footloose will activate, and for 7 seconds, they're going to have their weight buff, they're going to have the unstoppable buff, and that means 30% reduced ability accuracy, which means 30% or roughly 1 in 3 parries will fail for you. And that will likely also be a bit of an equalizer in some of the matchups, where if you do not have a good counter, you still kind of have a chance if opponent cannot completely get rid of all the opponent's buffs, where, they might mess up on missed parries, which does happen more often than people like to admit. But other than that, it's a very straightforward meta. It's probably going to be quite nukey. So let's go over some champions that might excel. I do think that obviously in science class, it is going to be extremely important to have Silk, because she is one of the fastest Battlegrounds attackers, and she has a very quick and easy access to slow at pretty much any state of the fight. And I think Silk is going to be extremely vital attacker for the meta. There is also potential of seeing She-Hulk. I think if you have ranked She-Hulk up already, then she's definitely going to be putting in some work. Obviously, pushing the pace of the fight, consistent slows and easy access to slows. So she's going to be, earning her keep. If you have ranked up Spider-Gwen, similar to that. Of the newer champions, I do think that both Luke Cage and Red Guardian might have a chance in this meta. If you have ranked them up, their buffs, this will be the time to utilize them. In case of Luke Cage, it will be primarily due to his concussion, which effectively can shut down, opponents' abilities altogether, and you can extend the duration of that. So you're going to want to build up to level 2, slow play it a bit at the beginning, then drop your level 2 whilst shutting off the Footloose and then being able to be as aggressive as you can. And then also Red Guardian, get level 1. You basically have constant slow on the opponent. Moving on to the next classes, out of all the skill champions, I do think that Shang-Chi is pretty much the most perfect option for this because, again, infinite and easy slow. So he's a nukey Battlegrounds attacker with a very sustainable and straightforward access to slow, similar to Stealth Suit Spider-Man. I do think that Stealth Suit Spider-Man is gonna have like a field day here because he does have access to slow that you can pretty much maintain the entire fight, and he's very fast, so I'm sure stealthy fans are quite happy. I do think Valkyrie will do just fine by being able to ignore the unstoppable, and if I'm not mistaken, then hitting in the block will not cause defenders to evade. And then moving on to mutant class, obviously Archangel with his ability to shut down ability accuracy and being immune to ability accuracy reduction himself. His parries will not fail, but he will switch off the Footloose node and the rest of the nodes completely. I think Magneto maybe has a chance to surface up. I don't really think he will because not enough people have ranked him up. But we do have Bishop, and the Bishop will work for a very simple reason because you kind of slow play with him anyways. You do parry a lot anyways, and you will have to be careful, but obviously he's going to be a solid champ, both offensively and defensively. And yeah, his kind of like success will lie simply to the fact that you're not really hindered by the fact that you're getting slowed down by Footloose. Because meanwhile, you can just, parry a bunch. And moving on to Tech Class kind of like claim to fame here, or the most reasonable path to success, is going to be preventing opponents from throwing special attacks in the first place. If you're using champion like Fam, where you can, have an entire fight without permitting opponent throw a special attack at all, then obviously he doesn't care about Footloose. And so I think Fam is going to be quite valuable. I think Hulkbuster can be quite valuable as well with his level 2 power drain. I think Red Skull is going to be, yet again, quite solid champion, both defensively and offensively, because you will effectively have to bait out 1 or 2 specials from the opponent, and then when you get going, you can, just let them hit your armor, replenish it, and kind of like stop opponents from throwing specials. Punisher 2099. This is one of those champions I actually kind of wish to rank 5 and Ascend, I think, at some point. Definitely an underrated champion, and yeah, significantly limiting the amount of specials opponents can throw. Then we have Warlock. Again, keep opponent below 1 bar of power, parry a lot, heavy a lot. He'll do just fine. And in Cosmic class, let's face it, Cosmic class really will not have many champions that deal with these nodes directly well. But they do have some options. I do think Hyperion, if you have a 7-star, especially rank 2, will be super useful. And Hyperion, for the reason that you can keep spamming your level 1s, which gives opponent very little power. And then meanwhile, whilst they are waiting out the Footloose, you can just, still keep gaining power and maintain the momentum of the fight. So I do think that Hyperion is going to be quite solid champ for this affair. Hulkling, just for the nuke aspect of him, get to 2.5 bars of power, go for level 2. You can nuke just about anyone or half the champions in the Battlegrounds deck. So Hulkling's still going to be popular. Venom can have a chance here with his level 1 Nom Nom. Again, you do need to be careful as and when you activate it, and you might have a chance hitting the buff. So, the big Venom players will probably still be running him. CGR can still work, again, due to his nuke abilities and due to his domination. Then we're going to have the Mystic class. And Mystic class, we can pretty much highlight most of the champions because, again, at the very least, even if you do not have abilities that directly correlate with any of the other nodes, nullification or anything else, if you run max Mystic Dispersion, you're basically going to get 2/3 of bar of power as soon as the Unstoppable expires and as soon as the evade buff expires. Obviously, Absman is going to kind of get a better stick off it because he reduces Unstoppable duration, but we're still going to be looking at Mojo, who reduces all buff duration. We're still going to be looking at Juggernaut, who will simply be able to stagger and nuke like crazy. Then we're going to have Symbiote Supreme, who's gaining popularity. Hood is going to be amazing. So will Tigra, and so will Longshot and Kushala. And so will Scarlet Witch for sure, because she's going to be stealing buffs and nullifying them and just being filthy overall. So Mystic class is going to be quite potent. So what does that mean? Obviously, because there's going to be a ton of Mystic class attackers, players will try to counter that by going to the Science defenders, by going to the Nullify Immune defenders. And that is, I believe, how the meta is going to look like. Again, it always kind of takes half of the class wheel that is pretty domineering in any given metas when Kabam is accenting one particular class. In this case, obviously, Kabam is giving a massive advantage to the Mystic champion, so you expect a lot of Mystic champions to be in people's decks. And with that, we can expect influx of Science champions on defense. And in order to deal with those Science champions, there's probably going to be some presence of skill champions. And then, other than that, it's going to be filled with some of the champions that I mentioned, plus the toughest defenders. Again, because this meta is very open, in a sense, it will also mean the defender variety is going to be very open. There is going to be very few defenders that are suddenly significantly more powerful than they normally would be. And because of it, it's just going to still be filled with, your bullseyes, your serpents, your maybe not maestro as much, but destroyers, your photons, your dusts, and whatever not that korgs and what people find more annoying right now. So I don't think that defense is going to switch up drastically. I think it's going to be more about people will be running a lot of mystics, and there's going to be counter-reaction to that by Science class, which again, people are going to be adding in skill champions like Shang-Chi, like Valkyrie, and a handful of others to deal with it, like Stealth Suit Spider-Man. So that is ultimately what I think is going to happen with the new Battlegrounds meta. If you do think some champion is going to excel tremendously, please do let me know. I'm very interested in that, obviously. And yeah, I hope you guys found this video useful. And if you did, hit that like button, hit that sub button, and I'll catch you guys later. Bye-bye. Hello there, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about